I believe laws exist to protect people and society, but it's also true that there are those who exploit legal loopholes to commit wrongdoings. Perhaps knowledge of the law is necessary to fight such evils. My name is Casey. Justice is the order of society, said Aristotle, an ancient Greek philosopher. Order, I get that. It refers to the rationale required for a society or such to be in this state of organization. But what is justice? It's a term that defines the correctness of human actions, but what's considered right can vary based on era, regional characteristics, religion, race, and various other factors. For instance, during war, defeating the enemy was justice, and for followers of certain religions, adhering to their teachings is the highest form of justice. But in today's society, harming an enemy is a crime, and for those not affiliated with a religion, they might not find justice in its doctrines. This has turned into a philosophical discussion, but it makes me wonder how Aristotle would explain it. I believe that creating and upholding rules for a safe and secure society is the justice demanded in our current world. I've always pondered about justice. This was largely influenced by my father, but I think it's also a part of my inherent nature. My father had strong convictions and despised injustice and wrongdoing. He often explained to my younger brother, who's 4 years younger than me, in age-appropriate, simple words about how people should be. Even as a child, I found his talks convincing and deeply impactful, and I was greatly influenced by them. Considering innate nature, being born as his daughter, I suppose genetically, his influence is the most significant. It was around middle school when I started taking an interest in law. At that time, TV dramas about prosecutors, judges, and lawyers were successively airing and gaining popularity. Though I was a strong-minded middle school student, I followed the trends like everyone else. What set me apart was my deep interest in the nature of those jobs, and seriously pondering what I would do in their place. Of course, like any regular viewer, I also admired the popular actors, and fell in love with the band singing the theme songs. That's how I became drawn to the world of law and legal studies. I haven't publicly admitted that my interest stems from the popularity of these legal dramas. Even if I was just a fan of the dramas, they genuinely captivated me, leading me to aspire to study law in college, where I was admitted and graduated with excellent grades. It's odd to say it myself, but I worked hard and learned a lot about law in those 4 years. After graduating, I was uncertain about my career path, so I worked in a field that piqued my interest for a couple of years, gaining life experience before my interest in legal work returned. Eventually, I secured a position at the Bar Association, overseeing lawyers in the state. Working in the legal field broadened my perspective on society. I became dedicated to finding ways to help the underprivileged who, faced with societal injustices, had no choice but to surrender without resistance. This quest became my life's work, and I immersed myself in it. So engrossed was I that time flew by, and before I knew it, I was nearing 30. It was then that the president of the Bar Association where I worked suggested a transfer to a bar association in Boston. According to him, Boston was fraught with problems, and he believed my efforts could help cleanse the city. Pleased that he recognized my abilities and intrigued by the new challenge, I accepted his offer. In the US, becoming a lawyer requires a membership in a state bar association, a private organization overseeing lawyers' activities. Since lawyers work at law firms, bar associations don't directly handle cases from clients. One of my roles was managing a legal consultation service for the public. There are far more people in legal distress than commonly thought, and I wanted to help as many as I could. Law firms and individual lawyers have their specializations, like criminal law, civil cases, traffic accidents, or divorce issues. Within the area overseen by our bar association, there was a firm notably dedicated to public legal consultations. Though it was partly a business strategy to attract clients, their active engagement in less profitable areas clearly showed their commitment to helping the public. Stanley, a lawyer at this firm, was actively involved in our legal consultation service. I admired his approach, always considering the citizen's perspective. Casey, the consultation desk is open until 5 p.m. today, right? Let's try to help as many people as possible. Thank you as always. I think it's going to be busier than usual today. Stanley listened attentively to each client and offered precise advice. In cases where advice wasn't enough, he carefully explained the necessary costs before suggesting they use a law firm's services. His intent to help those in trouble, rather than mere profit, was clear. Of all the lawyers I've met, Stanley is among the very best. As we spent more time together, Stanley and I grew closer, discussing various matters including work. Once, he mentioned being troubled over a case he was handling. I cautiously asked about the case, prefacing with, if it's okay to ask. Though he might have thought it was pointless to discuss it with a staff member like me, he showed no such reservations and shared the details. While he probably did so casually, I was thrilled that he trusted me and wanted to help in any way I could. The case had 2 key points, and as I listened, possible solutions began to emerge. I chose my words and expressions carefully to avoid seeming presumptuous and share my thoughts. He genuinely appreciated my input. Wow, I hadn't thought of that. Thanks, that's really helpful, he said with an untroubled smile, and I rediscovered his broad-mindedness and rich humanity. About half a month later, Stanley came to me looking delighted. Thanks for your advice the other day. Everything went well just as you suggested, Casey. The client was satisfied, and it even boosted my reputation. I'm glad I could help. You know, Casey, you're really knowledgeable about law and adept at problem solving. Did you ever work as a paralegal at a law firm? Oh no, I just studied a bit of law. It helps with my job at the administration office. I had to be vague in my response, not able to give a straight answer. I see, but you're really talented and smart. So, as a thank you, would you let me treat you to a meal? Although I hesitated, Stanley insisted, saying, please, I'd really like to treat you to dinner, and I ended up accepting the invitation. I couldn't refuse outright, but deep down I was genuinely pleased. The restaurant Stanley chose was stylish yet relaxed, suitable for adults, a new experience for me who had always been focused on work. He was a great conversationalist, never letting me get bored. He spoke passionately about his job, but also had interesting hobbies outside of work. Our conversation wasn't one-sided. He skillfully engaged me, making it a pleasant exchange of words. As the evening seemed to be drawing to a close, Stanley said, thanks for joining me today. I invited you under the pretext of thanking you for the other day, but I've wanted to ask you out for a long time. I'm glad I finally got the chance, and I don't want it to be just for today. After these words, Stanley seriously asked me to be his girlfriend. Having never been approached like this by a man, I was initially stunned, but soon found myself naturally responding, yes, I'd be happy to. Our relationship began, and I found the new essence it added to my daily life refreshingly delightful. Stanley frequently consulted me about work, and my earnest efforts to help seemed to be precisely what he needed, as his work was going smoothly. Seeing him happy made me happy too. I felt like a wife supporting her husband from behind the scenes. Just thinking about it made me blush, as my mind wandered to the idea of marriage. As if God had read my thoughts, Stanley proposed, Casey, will you marry me? Presenting a ring. In my heart, I exclaimed, thank you, God. And so we got married. I never imagined I'd be a married woman until recently, and it felt incredibly surreal. My parents and younger brother blessed our union, and I was truly happy. My uncle, who had always adored me since I was young, congratulated me on my marriage but looked troubled. My father explained that my uncle was probably feeling sad about me, whom he considered like a daughter, getting married. Married life was full of trial and error, but those challenges were enjoyable. The sense of satisfaction from each new discovery was undoubtedly what happiness felt like. I continued working, discussing it with Stanley, who gladly accepted it. So I strive to manage the household chores diligently. We both work, so let's not leave all the housework to you alone. We should cooperate as a couple, right? Stanley's considerate words deeply touched me. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary together with a toast. However, I've been worried about something concerning Stanley lately. First, he stopped working at the public consultation desk. He also stopped showing up at the bar association and seemed to consciously avoid front desk duties at the law firm. He must have his own vision and thoughts about his work. It's sad that he hasn't shared them with me, but I understand men want to make their own decisions. What's more concerning is that he's been coming home late. At the beginning of our marriage, he would rush home after work unless there was unexpected overtime, and we'd spend time together. But gradually, he started coming home later, and it's not uncommon for him to return after midnight now. Stanley, are you that busy with work? If so, I'm worried about your health. Please try to come home earlier. It's work. Can't help it. Don't worry unnecessarily about me. But it's natural for a wife to worry. You often come home after the day changes. So what? I'm working hard. By the way, I have a business trip this weekend. A business trip? Why? What kind of case requires that? Stop nagging. It's necessary, so I'm going. It would be nice if you could just see me off happily. Stanley waved his hand dismissively and retreated to his room, sounding annoyed. That weekend, he really did go on an overnight business trip. Though it's not unheard of for lawyers to travel, I thought it was quite rare. When Stanley returned, he brought back a local delicacy as a souvenir, but I wasn't happy at all. His late returns continued, sometimes not coming home until the day had changed. And occasionally he was away for weekend work or business trips. Once, I found a long hair on his suit when he came home. Was it just an accidental attachment? But what kind of situation would lead to such an accident? My mind was in turmoil, desperately trying to make sense of things, but it was all in vain. I witnessed something that made it all clear. One day, when Stanley said he was going for work on a weekend, I decided to go out to the city for a change of scenery. Walking towards my favorite store in the downtown area, my eyes caught sight of someone emerging from a nearby alley, and I froze in place. It was Stanley, who was supposed to be working at that time. Just seeing him there at this hour was surprising enough. But what shocked me more was the woman walking beside him, their fingers intertwined like lovers. I was surprisingly calm. So, that's how it is, I thought to myself detached. Without realizing it, my feet followed them. About 10 minutes later, they disappeared into an entertainment district. That night, I sat quietly on the living room sofa, waiting for Stanley to return. At 12:30 a.m., he came home humming a tune, but when he saw me sitting there, he gasped in surprise. "Welcome back, Stanley. You seem to have had a good time. Hard work, right? You're up? Good time. It was work, not exactly fun. Today, I went to the city. I saw you and a woman entering a suspicious place. How long have you been cheating?" Stanley flinched for a moment at my words, but quickly recovered. "What are you talking about? That's a big misunderstanding. If you saw us, you should have called out. She's a client. We had a meeting in that lounge, that's all." "Really? Just a meeting in a lounge? And you had to pick up a key at the front desk? That's an interesting system. I didn't know that." I spoke coolly, suppressing my emotions. "You saw that far? Even so, you can't just conclude it's cheating. What if I was just escorting her to her room?" "Really? You're quite kind to your clients." Stanley, sensing my attitude of seeing through everything, retorted angrily. "Ugh, this is so annoying. There's no proof of me cheating, right? Anyway, I have something to say. It's a good opportunity. Let's get divorced. I'm tired of you." "Stanley, you think of me like that? We've been married just over a year. Is there no love left?" Facing me, Stanley changed completely and began to speak. "Love? There was only a little at the beginning. I thought you looked younger than your age, so having you as my wife wasn't bad. And you're good at solving problems, so I thought you might be useful." That's a terrible thing to say, looking younger than my age. It's the truth. I thought you'd be useful, but you weren't. A disappointment. So you're no longer needed. I'll divorce you and marry someone more useful to me. I had once thought Stanley was a wonderful man, but perhaps this was his true self. With my limited experience in love, I couldn't see through Stanley's real nature. That was frustrating. "So, you cheated because of this?" "Come on, how many times do I have to say it? Is there any proof of me cheating?" "Our divorce? Well, let's call it irreconcilable differences. A 50-50 split." 50-50? But that doesn't sound right. Wouldn't this be a case for claiming compensation in a divorce trial? Compensation in a divorce trial? Where is the proof for that? Haha, if you can provide proof, I'll give you $500,000. Stanley was confident, believing he wouldn't be exposed. To me, that seemed foolish, and I couldn't help but laugh, ruining my attempt to remain cool and collected. Are you sure about that? Stanley's face contorted in surprise at my sudden change of demeanor. Your partner was Sarah, right? The receptionist at the office. You thought her father, who owns a big law firm, could be useful to you. How do you know about Sarah? Sorry to say, but even though we're married, I didn't share everything with you. I'm capable of many things. Like this, for example. I handed him a piece of paper. Stanley trembled in disbelief as he looked at it. It was a written statement from Sarah promising she would never see Stanley again. After witnessing them together today, I had waited and caught them coming out. Though they split up immediately, I managed to speak with Sarah alone. Since Stanley returned home late at night, he likely went out somewhere after the incident, but that's beside the point for now. I approached Sarah after she was left alone and informed her that I was aware of her involvement and the affair. Knowing who I was, she was visibly shaken. I took her to a nearby restaurant. There, I made her write a statement agreeing not to engage in any sexual or communicative relationship with Stanley in the future. Taking her to a public place ensured the statement was written voluntarily, without coercion or threats. Seeing the statement, Stanley gripped it tightly, shaking. Just writing this means? Yes. The statement doesn't apologize for the affair, but it essentially admits to it. You, as an excellent lawyer, understand this could be a significant piece of evidence in court, right? Stanley began to shake with the statement in his hand. Of course the statement was a copy, so tearing it up wouldn't matter. Then I presented Stanley with further proof of the affair. WhatsApp conversations between him and Sarah, receipts from restaurants they frequented on dates, and more. Since when did you gather all this? The confidence Stanley had earlier vanished, and his face turned pale. I'm glad to hear I'll be receiving $500,000 in compensation. My investigative skills and knowledge were honed after graduating from college, working at my father's detective agency. My father's sense of justice was put into practice by leading a company that exposed societal injustices. Drawn to my father's work due to a shared sense of justice, I spent 2 years studying and training in investigation, partly influenced by a detective TV show at the time. Perhaps, like when I aspired to enter the world of law, this was another sign of my lack of personal growth. However, this experience proved invaluable in my later work. The work is... I slowly pulled out a badge from my pocket and pinned it on my chest. Why do you have such a badge? Stanley's eyes widened in disbelief. The badge I wore was a lawyer's badge. Sorry I didn't tell you. I am a lawyer, just like you. Normally after college, one would proceed to law school, but I joined my father's agency for training and later enrolled in law school, eventually becoming a lawyer after completing the JD program. The president of the Bar Association where I first found employment was my uncle. Wanting to work broadly for the public, I requested to be affiliated with my uncle's office. I also placed my name at my uncle's law firm and gained experience as a lawyer. With my uncle's help, I managed to juggle these two roles, although it was physically demanding. My investigative skills, honed at my father's office, often proved necessary in legal practice. Over the years, my name became known in the legal world. I transferred to the current Bar Association in Boston, recommended by my uncle, while continuing to work at his firm and serving as a member of the disciplinary committee. When a lawyer commits an act of violating the law, it is first deliberated by the ethics committee of the Bar Association they belong to. If the committee deems the act intolerable, it is then brought to the disciplinary committee for review and possible sanctions. As someone in a position to judge lawyers, I had refrained from revealing this fact, even to my husband. Stanley, now aware of my true identity, was in a state of shock. Stanley, it seems you've been quite bad. A person of sound judgment has filed a complaint, and the disciplinary committee has already started to take action. What Stanley was doing, simply put, was guiding people in tax evasion. At the public consultation desk, he identified financially struggling individuals and craftily proposed tax evasion, teaching them the methods and making money from it. How could you? How could you find out all this? Stanley cried out in despair. His belief that he wouldn't be discovered was absurd. Subsequently, Stanley was arrested by the police. His tax evasion guidance was not just a solo act. He was the mastermind of a large, organized operation involving multiple people. The FBI, conducting an undercover investigation, stepped in. The prosecutor in charge of the case was my brother. My brother, like me, had pursued a career in law and had been appointed as a prosecutor. As a side note, this achievement enabled him to transfer to the FBI, which he had been aspiring to. The disciplinary committee is currently deliberating on Stanley's case, and it's likely he will face the most severe sanction: disbarment. Disbar lawyers lose their license for a certain period, and very few are readmitted upon reapplication. The divorce with Stanley was finalized. I plan to claim the maximum amount of compensation, though it won't reach $500,000. However, I doubt a convicted, unemployed Stanley will have the capacity to pay. My uncle apologized to me. He had suspected something amiss under the current Bar Association's management and hoped that I would uncover it by transferring there. At that time, he didn't know the details and had no idea who the culprit was. But he felt uneasy about my marriage to Stanley, a lawyer of the same Bar Association. It all made sense why he had a troubled expression when I announced my marriage, but it wasn't his fault. It was my shortcoming for not seeing people's true nature. I'm determined to avoid losing trust in people because of this incident. I want to continue using the law for the good of society and for justice.